So ladies, what I've done is I've spotlit my video for everybody. So it'll be me that you see. And I'm just about to mute you all. So that means any questions you would like to ask during the course of this first bit of the session, you'll need to type into your chat box. So for me, sitting on my laptop, my chat box is, if I hover my mouse at the bottom of my screen, a chat button comes up, and if you click that, and for me it sort of comes up as a text box on the side of my computer. Those of you who are on mobile phones will be a little bit different, and I don't have a tablet, so I don't have a clue what it's like on a tablet. I'm sure you'll work it all out. So perhaps we've heard the weather forecast already from Sue there, so perhaps just to make sure your chat box is working and just to confirm you can hear me okay. You want to leave me a weather report, whether it's sunny or cold. Brilliant, brilliant. So I think you're starting to let me know that you can hear me okay. So as the format for class will be that I will demonstrate what we're going to be doing today. And then that'll take about half an hour or so. And then I will take you all off mute. Actually, you have to take yourselves off mute at this point. And you can ask your questions live, so we'll have a proper two-way conversation. Anything perhaps you didn't quite understand from my demonstration, or perhaps if you've got materials that are slightly different to mine, we can work a solution around what we're going to do. And then for those of you who've got time, that you can stay and make and create with me. So I don't know whether I'll finish my project, but that's a good opportunity for me to finish my project. And if you want to make a start on yours, that's a great opportunity just to get you kick-started. But at any point during today's class, if you need to disappear, you can either shut your video down, or you can of course leave the meeting by pressing that big red button at the side, which I think says end or stop, or I think actually it might say leave meeting for you. It says end for me. And anything you miss, of course, I will send you the recording of the class afterwards. So just to reassure you, I chop off the bit at the beginning of the class when we have saying our hellos, and I will chop off the bit before we get to the live Q&A. So it's just my face, my hands, my flowers that will go out on the video. Oh, I'm hearing Joan's been unwell. I'm sorry to hear that, Joan, but I hope you're feeling better soon. We'll have to find out how you are when we chat later on. So before we skip on to what we're going to be doing today, I just wanted to show you the flowers I finished last week, which I think was quite a challenge for you. Now, normally I would tip these forwards towards you, but we didn't use any flower foam last week. And I have checked, and I have actually still got water in my receptacle. So I will hold it up, but I won't tilt it down. So this, I've got a saucer underneath. Did you find that because the little container we made had an open bottom where our little receptacles went in, you can see that, but I've got an open bottom there. It was much easier to lift it up and transport it if you put it on something. So I did have this on the coaster, and just for ease for today to bring it to show you, I put it on a small decorative plate. So as you remember, I use my wool for the edges. Most of you use raffia. And then these little rolled up pieces of magazine, these straws around the edge. So some of you were very clever, and you used your straws that were left over, the paper straws that we bought for a staycation of flowers that took place over the summer holidays. So that was a nice, easy workaround. And then others were more inventive. I think we saw sheet music being rolled up, and the sort of freebie flies that you get through the letterbox, that kind of thing. And then in terms of decorating, really putting the flowers in at the end was not so much an afterthought, but it was all about the construction, the technique that was important. And you can see here that my tulip, which is really tiny, has grown up a little bit, and that's now protruding above everything else. But I have got a casualty, and these roses, which were in my mixed bouquet, were obviously not very good because it's just fine, even though it's been on a short stem. So what I'll be doing after class is taking away all the dead flowers. I'm not sure my little tater-tate daffodils are going to last much longer, but I'll keep the arrangement going by just taking out things that are dead, dying and dangerous, and putting in little bits and pieces to keep it going. So this will be going, forever and ever, really, until I get fed up with it. And then, of course, I can then store the container away in the cupboard. And as long as I'm not too heavy-handed with where I put it, I should be able to bring it out, to use again at some future point in time. So I shall move that out of the way. Looking forward. Yeah, it looks like everyone's pretty much got the same weather, sunny but wet, quite a little bit windy. Now, before we go on to what we're doing this week, let's talk a little bit about next week. So next week it is the, me and dates, 8th of February. And then the week afterwards is Valentine's Day. So we're going to do a little bit of a Valentine's arrangement and creating what could be a bouquet or a tall structure to sit in sort of a conventional flower arrangement at the bottom. I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to put mine in water or do it with in a base with flower foam and greenery. And the equipment that you'll need next time round is some of this wire. So this is the aluminium wire, and there is a link to that in the handout I've sent you. It comes in all sorts of colours. So I've got red here. I think it was red for Christmas, but we'll do red for Valentine's Day. It does come in different colours though. You'll get all sorts, pale pink, you can go blue, you can go gold, silver. So have a look and see what you've got available either in your toolbox. There's no point in going out and buying stuff new if you've already got bits and pieces. If you belong to a flower club, you may well find your sales table. Your flower club might sell this. And now you know what it is. You may be able to look in your local craft store or perhaps even your garden centre and find something similar. The other thing we're going to be using are carnations, so the standard carnation, so the carnation that's on a straight stem with one flower head on the top. And I have gone to my, how many did I order? I was just going to say, I went to my florist the weekend and I ordered them. And I can't for the life of remember how many I ordered. I think I might have done something like 20. So that's the reason I've gone to the florist, because I couldn't guarantee being able to find the carnations in the supermarket. So you might get lucky, but equally you might be sort of stressing yourself out because you saw carnations last week and they're not in the shop this week. And that's the reason why I went to the florist and pre-ordered. I wanted to have one, a set number of carnations, but in one colour to make my very distinctive, what is going to become a heart-shaped motif that we're going to create using the aluminium wire and the carnations. So if you haven't done so already, perhaps your task for today, tomorrow, is to go and visit your florist and put your order in, so you've got plenty of time. You're not going to be rushing and fretting. So the expense will be the flowers and the wire, but you don't necessarily need the rest of the flower arranging paraphernalia, because you could always put your heart-shaped bouquet into a vase and have it as a vase rather than having it as a very modern alternative topiary tree, I guess would be as good a word as any. So I hope that's clear, and if you've got any questions, perhaps leave them, we'll talk about it in the Q&A afterwards, and perhaps we'll leave the chat box just for what we're doing today. So on to today's project. And we're going to be using aspidistra leaves, and it was interesting to see in the Facebook group the difference in price that we've all been paying for our aspidistra leaves. So some of you were able to get to a wholesaler, and some of you, like me, were going to your high street florist. I normally find that when you're buying just small quantities of flowers, that I find, although it's more expensive in the florist, for me personally, by the time I've gone to my wholesaler, which is half an hour drive away, and pre-ordered and driven back and been to collect them, but all that taken together means that for single items like this, I'm quite happy to go to the high street florist. And it's nice to support your local high street as well. So what we're going to be using today is a flower foam base, a wreath ring. And I know that some of you are going foam free, so we will talk about your mechanics in the question and answer session. So like everything we do in class, take what I do as a springboard for you to be creative. So if you want to go foam free, you're going to have to use the old grey matter and adapt the techniques that we're going to be using. And some of the projects that we are doing over the 9 weeks are foam free projects. So we're just weaning ourselves slowly off the flower foam, and it being, as we know, a single-use plastic, which isn't very good for the environment at all. So just looking at this, this is one of these bases where it's sort of got this hard polystyrene at the bottom. So it's given me a flush line on the edge. I haven't got the base that's in a, looks like it's sort of sealed into a plastic dish. I don't know if you know the type, but it has a little ridge on that type. and I just wanted something streamlined and straight at the sides, so I didn't have to get my leaves to go over the knobble at the back. But if that's what you've got, you use it. Don't waste your money by going out and buying something new. You'll just have your leaves sort of splaying out a little bit, but that could be a lovely decorative item. I've also gone for quite a small wreath frame, and I think from memory this was going to model my imperial and metric measurements. I think this is a 10-inch wreath ring. Now, based on the size of my tulips, which I bought at the weekend, and when I bought them, I thought, gosh, these are really, really small-headed. I thought, actually, I've probably got enough tulips to go a bit bigger with my wreath frame, but I've discovered that I only had heart shapes in my workshop. So again, I am working with what I've got. And if you're ever stuck on the size of wreath frame you want to get, I always recommend the 12-inch, 30 centimetre one. It's just a very good practical size. But for some reason, I just have these small ones, which presumably were left over from another project. So I've got that. You've seen me with my aspidistra. I'm lying on the side there, and I'll bring them closer into shot, on my tulips. So I've taken my tulips out of water, and one of you asked a really good question in a Facebook page this morning, asking me why I was taking my flowers out of water, because we all know the flowers need to be in water to survive. And the reason for that is that with a circular form, I want to put my tulips to mimic that circular form. And it's just the issue of how do you get a very straight flower with the turgid stem. It's taken up water. If you want to manipulate that around the circular shape of your wreath form, you need to have a bit of flexibility, and your stems need to be slightly pliable. And the way to do that is to take your flowers out of water, and they will start to bend a little bit. And then as soon as they're back in the flower foam, in their source of water, they will take up water again, and the stems will become more robust, more turgid again. And that's the reason why I suggest you take your flowers out of water. Although I will say I forgot to do that last night, so mine have only been out of water a very short amount of time, and they still seem to be quite stiff, so I'll have to have a play with that. And then the other thing I've got, you'll notice I've got no, apart from my leaves, there's no greenery. If you're going for a much bigger wreath base than me, and when you finish the class, if you think you can see holes, gaps, you can see down to your flower foam, you may want to put in some very small leaved greenery just to cover up your flower foam. And I would say greenery that doesn't really show. So it may be, you know, if you've got a tiny hebe or some rosemary sprigs, if you feel you need to dot anything in, or perhaps even some moss if you've got some left over from your door wreath making at Christmas, or there's been a bit of a wind and perhaps you've had moss blown down from your roof onto your drive. You can always pick those bits up and put them into your table arrangement. So how are we going to fix the leaves in place? You've got options here that you could go for decorative pins. So these are the pearl-headed pins that have got the little coloured top to them. And they are lovely and decorative, but your eye will be drawn to them. So if you do use those, you may want to think about just using, I've got multicoloured pins in here. You may want to think about just using a single colour, and you may, or you may not, think about where you're placing them, whether you're getting them to be pinned equally throughout your wreath form, or whether you want to concentrate on getting them in straight lines. So because that's too much for me to think about, I'm going to go with the steel pins, which look like dressmaking pins, but they're slightly fatter with a slightly larger head. And basically, I think they're going to look invisible. So don't worry about it, because when I come to do this bit, I'll bring the second camera in and you'll be able to see in more detail what I'm going to be using them for and how I would use them. But again, I had these in my box in my workshop, so I thought I would make use of them. At a pinch, you could use dressmaking pins, but you'll find that they're probably fine with a smaller head. And you may find that when you're piercing through your leaves, that the leaf might rip off. But if you've got nothing else, it's worth giving it a go. So first things first, because we're going to be using fresh flowers, the tulips, you need to make sure that you soak it in water. I'm just checking the, I'm just taking a look at reading the little note coming up on chat. So it's saying that we could use a foam wreath or the posy pad. So the posy pad is exactly the same as the wreath form, but it's filled in the middle, and that is perfectly fine. Whatever you've got, it's just the circular form that we want to make. I'm going to be filling my hole in the middle. So I'll show you how to do that. And you'll just need to, looking at your comment, Joe, you will slightly need to adapt what we're going to do, but I will talk about that with you in mind. I will make sure that I talk about how you're going to create a central detail in the middle of your posy pad. And if I don't, we will talk about it in the Q&A at the end. Lots to remember. So I need to soak my flower foam, and you can see here I've been rather risky, and I've got a washing up bowl full of water. Now my wreath form is quite small, so I know that when I turn this upside down so the foam is at the bottom, that it will just float merrily on the top surface of my water and it will sink down. So if you've gone for a bigger wreath form, and it may well not fit in your washing up bowl, and you will need to do a bit of dipping and rotating. So imagine I've got, a really lovely 14, 16, 18-inch wreath frame. And what you would do, I'll have to talk you through this because I realise my bowl isn't see-through and you can't really see. So whereas I say normally that you shouldn't push your flower foam underwater, I need to get my flower foam in the water in order that it can start to soak up. So I'm not pushing it down really heavily. I'm just sort of holding it and waiting for that bit of flower foam to soak up water. So you can see there where it's changed colour. So if I let that soak a little bit more, I would then rotate it round and I would put it in the flower foam again. So it's almost like you're giving it a little bit of support, letting it take up the water of its own accord, but not pushing it down. And the reason why we don't push it down is because that normally results in airlocks and dry sections in your flower foam. So because I know I can fit my flower foam into the washing up bowl, I am going to just let it sink down of its own accord. And as I look down, of course, I can't tilt it towards you because I'll flood the computer. I can see that the water is rising through the flower foam, and I think probably that is already now and soaked. As I take it out, I know you can't see how heavy it is, but I don't know if you can tell from my hands that it is now heavy and it's gone dark with water. So it's going to dribble that off like that. And what I would probably do if I was making this at home, I might have pre-soaked my foam and just let it drain a tiny bit. Not totally dry out, but you do find when you've immediately soaked your flower foam, that when you come to add your flowers, you end up with a puddle of water on your table. So I have got an emergency towel here for mopping up the drips. So I might just lay out my towel in order that I don't get my work surface streaming with water. So I would probably soak that, leave it on my draining board for 20 minutes, just to let the excess moisture dribble away, but don't let it dry out. So don't do this the day before and let it dry out, because of course your flowers are going to need water in order to survive. Question coming again, using mossing pins. So mossing pins, also known as German pins, are the pins that look like giant staplers. So they've got the crossbar of a stapler, but they've got legs as well. And they come in different sizes. So you can get them 3 centimetre, 4 centimetre, 5 centimetre. And they do tend to have that bar at the cross, sometimes with a ridge in. So they'll be much easier to use because you've got like a thumb press where you can press them in. Just make sure that they're not so long, they're going to pierce the base of your flower foam, because you don't want then to put your arrangement on the table and then sort of move it out of the way and discover you've scratched your kitchen table or your dining room table, even worse. So I always suggest using German pens, before you put your flower arrangement down, just run your hands across the bottom to make sure they haven't gone right the way through, and also to perhaps put your arrangement on a platter just so it doesn't you collect the drips and it's not going to scratch. So my thing is, yes, I do think they look a tiny bit ugly, but if that's what you've got, that's what you use. And just, I would say the thing there is to perhaps just think about your placement, because you know your eye is going to be attracted to them because they're quite wide. I would think perhaps more carefully about where you're putting them. Perhaps try and get them all on the same line, so you are pinning, a consistent height from the base of the arrangement, and perhaps even think about pinning, so you have them every 10 centimetres instead of where perhaps you felt you needed them, if that makes sense for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring the camera overhead so you can get a bird's eye view of what I'm doing. And that's when I'm going to start off with my first round of pinning with my aspidistra leaves. So just bear with me a second as I scuffle off and scuffle back again. You can see here my wreath base. It's ever so slightly pot marked, you know, it's been in and out of my workshop and it's just got a little bit marked. That doesn't matter because everything is going to get covered up. You won't see this in the end. And the leaves I've got from my florist, they're lovely, absolutely gorgeous, very tactile. But I wondered whether you wanted to shine your leaves up. So you can buy a leaf shine and they go lovely and shiny. But if you don't have leaf shine and you want to shine your leaves up, you can also do it with, I think, with baby oil. I've got some very fancy olive oil spray here, but I normally use the One Cal spray oil to do this. And you can give a couple of squirts, and then with a piece of kitchen towel or a soft cloth, you can rub that in, and that gives your leaves a lovely glossy appearance. That's an option. A little tip for you if you want to have your leaves having a nice shine. So you can see if I bring, I don't know whether you can tell from the camera there, but that's the one I've just shined. And actually it's quite sunny in my kitchen, so I can see that this one's glistening, but that, I think the sunlight is catching that one there. So that's an option there of what you want to do. You can gloss them up. And you can see here that my leaves, this one here, the second one, is a little bit smaller than the one in the front, and that's just nature. You'll just get this variation in size of your materials. So what I'm going to do is, in the gist of what we're trying to do, is to pin your leaves around the edge of your flower foam. And you can see here, if I tip that up, I've got an awful lot of leaf standing up above my flower foam. And because the leaf is shaped, you end up with bits like this, that where your wreath base isn't covered. So what I'm going to do, for me, I'm going to straighten off my leaves by cutting them. You do not have to cut them though. If you are clever with your placement and you're not too mean, you can make sure you get enough overhang to cover up this gap. So you'd have your other leaf starting back here, and then that would be underneath. So you do not have to go ahead and cut your leaves if you don't want to. There are ways and means around that. And if you do decide to cut your leaves, I would go with caution and just cut one leaf at a time and cut it to fit. You don't want to think, actually, I've worked out I need 2 centimetres off my leaf, then discovered that they are all different sizes and you've wasted the materials that you've bought. So first thing I'll do is cut off this stem, and I'm cutting it off not just off the stem, but I'm going into the heel of the leaf as well. And that's because you'll find that this bit of the stem is quite thick and it's not quite as pliable, as movable as everything else. And if I'm going to get a flat-ish leaf to bend around the corner, it's much easier to do it with the more supple moving parts of the leaf. So here goes, trying to work out how tall to have my leaf. Now, bearing in mind, I'm going to be cut away my tulips at the moment, just cut off the elastic band so I can pick one up. My tulips have got, you know, quite a nice sized head. They're neither too big nor too small, but they have got some volume to them. And these tulips are going to be laid around the top surface of your flower foam. And I'm envisaging that I'm going to have this sort of tunneling effect around the edge. So if my flower head is this big, I want an upstand of my leaf of about this big. So it's sort of creating this tunneled effect. So don't go too short. I would say if you're trying to match your leaf to the top edge of your flower foam, it's going to be too short. So I would lift it up a little bit, perhaps having, you know, a centimetre and a half overhang or upstand, I should say. And that again is going to disguise your flower foam in the hope I don't have to go out and dig around for moss or tiny bits of greenery. So here I'm going to eye it up, and I reckon for me, as it happens, that is the spine of my leaf. I just need to cut off a little bit next to the spine of the leaf. This is quite satisfying. I'm not actually chomping with my scissors. I'm getting the scissors to almost just glide through the leaf. And then do not throw that away. We'll be using that piece in a moment. Just reach across my pins, Now I've got slightly greasy hands because of that leaf shine that happened earlier. So I am going to start off, and I want my leaf to be level with the bottom edge of my flower foam. So what I like to do is when I pin my leaf in, you can see that with the difference between the hard polystyrene and the soft foam, what I'm going to do is aim through the soft foam, and can you see the angle of my pin? I'm going to anchor it down into the hard surface of the flower foam. So I'm going in at 45 degrees. I just feel that that holds better. You could just go straight at 90 degrees into your soft foam, but I feel that's just going to pull out too easily. And if you try going straight in through the heavy base here, you may find it's quite hard going. So my preference, and again, your own routine, is to go through and go from the wet foam through to the solid base. Now, can you see? I don't know if you can see. I think I need to cut a bit more leaf off. It's just standing up a little bit too much there. Just much more soft and pliable. So taking a leaf, and I can feel it locking down into that flower foam. So I've got this neat, discreet pin. And of course, if you're using a pearl-headed pin, they will look beautiful and decorative. But of course, your German pins are going to look a little bit heavy if you're going to be using those. So going through, picking my next pin. And because these pins are quite discreet, I'm putting a pin in. I'm probably going to put 3 pins per leaf. I'm not measuring mine, but if you've got, you want to make more of a statement where you're putting your leaves, you could go ahead and measure them. So I'm just about ready to put a new pin in here, but you can see the leaf is tapering off. So before I fix this one, I'm going to slide another leaf in underneath. So I'll do exactly the same thing. I've got now my skinnier leaf. I'm cutting off a bit more of a generous part of the leaf at the bottom, having sort of worked out what I need. I haven't shined this, and I'm not going to cut this one down because this is a smaller leaf as well. So this is when it gets ever so slightly tricky. You need about 3 hands for this. But finishing off your leaf there, pulling back the flap, sliding the next leaf in and pulling that down. So I am going to put in my pin down here at an angle. I can feel it locking in. The join is here. So I'm not bothered about, I don't want to have more pins than leaf, but I don't want to be so sparse with my pins that they don't actually do the job. So I've actually pinned it where that leaf started and then pinned it at the end to try and trap the two together. So this leaf is a little bit short. So by the end of this, I will have gone through. And for me, with my 10-inch wreath frame, I will have had 3 leaves to go around the outside edge. So I will move on, line up at the bottom to cover up that foam. I need to go a bit further. Workmanship is everything. So that's gone around there. So I'm going to pin now. I've got a sewing needle there. Don't quite know how that got into my stash. Pin the last leaf down, and I can feel that was just going into the foam. So I readjusted the angle, coming round back to the beginning, and then I'm going to have to take the first pin out. Oh, no, I won't. I'm going to overlap it at the top because I think the tapered edge looks nicer than the pinned edge. So pin that in, get it into the foam, and the same over here. So I've gone around the outside edge and I've got a sort of caked look. And this is the lovely thing about these ascodist leaves. They cover up your flower foam. Flower foam is handy to use because it's a good water source, but you spend all your time when you're arranging flowers disguising the fact that it's there. And these big leaves just get on with the job. So you could use other leaves. Perhaps you've got some nice big Formula 10X or some laurel leaves, something like that. It's your choice. And then next one I'm going to go in is put my curl of leaf into the middle of the wreath. So again, getting rid of that hard base. I'm probably going to need 2 leaves here. And I'm just measuring up, I'm just seeing about the height. Because I have got that difference in width. I think that probably, again, that's quite a skinny one. Well, perhaps I might just take a little bit off the edge. It's a tiny bit taller. And I've probably taken, that's like a centimetre's worth. So don't be too scissor happy. and cut off too much to begin with. So I'm not going to pin this yet because I know I'm going to have to overlap or underlap my other leaf. So what I might do here is take my soft bits, measure up, and here I'm cutting for length rather than just cutting the heel of my leaf. So I have got quite a lot left over around there. So I'm just going to stand up and get a better look here. I'm going to overlap it so I end up with my nice tapered leaves on the top. I'm going to go over the top there and then tuck it under there. And then with my pins, come back and pin in position. So I'm feeling down, getting into the flower foam, locking it into the polystyrene base. Just so it's nice and secure. Like so. Now I seem to have a massive upstand here. So what I'm going to do is just trim that down a little bit. It's sort of, I'm going to create a slight undulating effect. So this is the only cut I've done so far. It's on the top surface of my leaf, and the leaf will be perfectly fine. And when I have finished arranging, you won't be able to tell, but I've trimmed that down, but just looked that it was overly tall and I wanted to get rid of it. So the next stage is to start with the good stuff, the exciting stuff with your flowers. And this is where we wanted our flowers out of water so we could manipulate them around a little bit. So mine are still a little bit too turgid, too stiff. So what I'm doing here is thinking about where my flower heads are going to go. And oops, just bring that down a bit so you can see. So I want my flower heads to be here, and then work backwards with your stems. And what I'm going to do as well, if I can, sometimes these leaves are a little bit fragile. I want to keep some leaf on, but I'm going to pull them down a little bit and bend it back. So that leaf sort of becomes part of the detail. So I've now got two leaves. I've got the aspidistra in the rich leathery green, and then the softer looking, more pale pastel green at the top. Now, what will happen here, I've only just laid this tulip on here, so it's going to shrivel up and die unless I insert the stem into the flower foam. So very gently, once I've got the flower head where I want it to be, I put the stem in the foam. And by doing that, you can see that the head has pinged up a little bit because you can't get a flower flat on the surface of the foam and then expect it to be able to take up water. And as you know, if you've worked with tulips before, these flower heads will continue to grow and they will move towards the light. So if I just leave that one resting there, come tomorrow morning, it may well be sitting at a 45-degree angle, or it may almost be upright. So it's a good idea, and perhaps this is where your German pins might come in. I'm going to take the floristry wire here and cut it. I'll cut it down to that length, create a loop. So this would be your homemade German pin. And I'm going to pin just lightly. I'm not going to pin it all the way down, but I just kind of want to lock that flower head into position. I'm not sure whether the camera's picking that up or not. So I'll see if I can get a close-up shot of that later. So it just holds fast. Now I'm lifting that up. One of my leaves is pinned off, so I'm going to put another pin down in the bottom. And then we work our way around. So again, we take our tulips. This leaf at the bottom is too big, so I'm going to pull that off. Because my wreath base is very short, very small, I haven't got, I'm going to be cutting my tulips, probably cutting 10 centimetres off each time because that bit's quite stiff. If you're working with a larger wreath base, you will be able to have much longer stems to work with. So again, it's traditional flower arranging. We've put the stem into the flower foam. This time it's all about where these leaves are going to end up. So I'm bending that leaf back. Now I could, if you don't like the leaves and yours are too perhaps misshapen, you can always pull the leaves off. So I want to position my flower head where I want it and then curl the stem round. It's then getting, for me, too stiff here. So I will cut it off and then angle it slightly and put that back into the flower foam. So at this stage, My flowers are probably in the foam 1/2 centimetre. I haven't pushed them down. Perhaps if you were doing a more conventional flower arrangement, you'd be really locking your flower stems down. So I am doing mine just so they're in contact. And again, if I want to pin that head in place, I'm not pinning it hard and fast to the surface of the foam. I'm just constraining it slightly, and then to move around a little bit more. That will look at that damaged. So what do? Pull it off or hope for the best? So I'm going to hope for the best. And what I'm going to do is, as I pull my leaf down and sort of flap it over itself, I'll make sure that damaged petal is on the other side. So we can come round like that. And again, I could pin the head in place. So if you're working on a much larger wreath base than me, you might want to add in more divides. And if you don't want to use the leaves of your tulips as a greenery, you might want to use your offcuts as these little tram lines. So what you can do is to take the offcuts and slide them down into your flower foam. And again, can you see that? It's like a little fence inside. So that's another option for filling up your flower foam, that you can take the greenery there. If you wanted to, and you think actually my leaves are all a bit too shaggy, I don't really like the look, you could take the leaves off. Perhaps leave, a little tiny one at the top, cut it down to size. And then when you put this in, you could mock up the little detail with the heads of with the leaves. Actually, I will take all of that off to show you what I mean. And I'm going to take that one off. The tulips are really delicate, so I just need to make sure I'm not too heavy-handed with them. So there, when I put it in just with the stem on its own, it does look very stark. So what you could do to mock up that sort of loop over bit, you could take some of your excess leaf, cut a strip and bend it over, and if needs be, cut a point so you've got something to push into your flower foam, and then you create your own little bridge over the top. Now, if you're lucky, these pieces of leaf will slide into your flower foam, but it's highly likely that they won't quite sit in the right place. So what you could do there is to take your mossing pin, your floristry wires, and you could pin that in place. And that would be a really good way of adding some textural detail into the wreath base that you're going to be creating. And then what are we going to do about this inner circle in the middle? So again, making it a feature. So you could stop here. If you've gone for the wreath base and you think, actually, I quite like a hole in the middle, that's entirely up to you. If you've gone for a solid posy pad base, this technique will work, I'm going to show you. And if you've got a hole that needs filling, this will be a really good way of doing it. So I'm going to move those just out of the way a little bit, get rid of my rubbish here. And with my flexible leaves, I'm going to make a coil of leaves to sit in the middle of my foam. So here, I'm going to cut off the hard bit, the heel end again. And if you are working on a posy pad, you will in all likelihood need to cut your leaves in half, because if you use the full depth of your leaf, it's going to stand too proud. So my leaves are going to sit on my tabletop. So I know from this leaf here that a full-size leaf is going to work really well. What I'm going to do is being a little bit designer and start to roll my leaves. So this is a really good way, if you've used up some leaves to create a little wall effect inside, and you've got offcuts if you have trimmed your leaves to size, that all those bits of leaf that you would perhaps be tempted to put into the bin can be reused again. So I'm just going to cut off that stiff bit there, it won't roll round. And you'll say to me, but Julie, how can I use a leaf that's only half as big? Well, what I'm going to do eventually is to put that in the middle like that. And if you have got half leaves to use, you just want to concentrate on lining your leaves up with the top surface of your leafage here. So again, doing the same thing. So this is one of those jobs that needs about 3 hands. If you had an elastic band, you could put an elastic band over the top to hold it steady. Of course, I have got an elastic band, but it's just a little bit out of reach. I'm going to see how much I can do with just using my hands. Oops, just trying to get that in shot better for you, like that. Well, that's quite a nice leaf there. I should have used that one on the outer edge. So what I'm doing here is pinching them. It's like a little hair roll I've made. There we go. And like that. And having watched me do this, if you think, well, goodness me, this is just a waste of my very expensive leaves, of course you can skip this part and just decide you want to leave your usual leaves for something else. It shouldn't take me too much longer. Wrapping it round. I'm going to go one more. I'm going to commit to this one more. And I'm going to, well, I will do that. Whoops, I've got it. For my last leaf, I'm going to make sure that the tapered end is on the outside. So I'm going to go stub end to stub end there. That's a square end cut, just so if you can see this finish, that I end up with the little detail of the tapered end right at the end. So what I have got is some paper covered wire. So this could be elastic band or some paper covered wire. And I'm going to tie this on. I'm not going to tie it too tight, because what I want this to do is to slightly uncurl inside the center of my wreath, but not uncurled to such an extent that the coils disappear. And I don't want it to be so tight you can't tell the coils are there. So can you see, if I move that closer, you can see the effect that I'm after. It's like this rosette form in the middle. I've got quite large gaps here, so I know now I can loosen off a little bit and let that relax a tiny bit more by just letting that sit like that. So this will take a little bit of trial and error. Again, I go a little bit more relaxed than that. And then when I've got it at the right size, I can tie off more firmly. But to begin with, I'm just easing, letting that fill in and sliding across. Now that has all slipped out live on the telly, and it's slipped out. What I'm going to do here then, they've all gone round. I'm going to roll them in my hand. I might have to do this slightly off camera. I know that that's about the right size, so I'm going to leave that there. And I'm going to roll those all around my hand. Like that. We're doing it in reverse here. And then in like that. And then got it in position. Look, by Jove, that has worked. So that's where you get that nice central area. And it's almost like it's that rosette form in the middle, and then it spins out and you've got the tulips coming out. And you can see I'll finish off my tulips when we do the make and create afterwards. So in terms of how many flowers you need, it will depend on how big your wreath base is. And the same with the leaves as well. But everything we do in class, it's a practice for when you're going to use these techniques for another time. And it's always, what I like to do is keep a notebook and just think, I want to do this again. And I want to, 8-inch wreath took however many tulips. And that gives me something really good to work on if I do a larger wreath base. So what I'll do is I'll come back with the face on camera, and we can have a look at, and I'll sign off for those ladies watching on record. And then we can go through to our live Q&A session. So ladies, this is another one that is going to be quite tricky to lift up and show you. I think actually, having looked in the camera overhead, that you do get a really good impression. The thing I thought perhaps you didn't see me do so clearly is if you want to use your tulip leaves as part of your foliage. So I would do this with caution, and I would always take off the lower leaf because it does tend to be quite straggly. And then what I did was the top leaf is I'm running my, at the moment, this leaf is sort of encased and enclosed around that flower stem. So what I did was run my fingers up it. And by doing that, you can get to reflex out. And then I twisted that around the stem. So it sort of gives this little pocket detail. So it's just a matter of whether you like that as a detail, or whether you would prefer to keep things more streamlined and just have your bare stems inside your swirl of flowers, or whether you want to make these little pins out of the leftover bits of your aspidistra leaf. And I think for security, they would need to be pinned down. So if I take that leaf off and that leaf off, every single one of my tulips is dropping one petal, but that would be the pinning effect you could give. So it would give you a more modern, cleaner look if you felt that you wanted to pin your leaves down in position. So I hope that was sufficiently clear for you. As ever, we're going to go to a live Q&A at the moment, but if you're watching the video on record, leave me, you can always comment, leave me a question underneath the video. So because the videos are always private listed, nobody else can see the comments except the people that have signed up for class. Or if you prefer and you want a group chat about what we're doing, don't forget that you can always join my free Facebook group, Flowers Start World, and we can discuss things in more detail there after class. So I shall say goodbye to those of you who are watching on record, and I will stop the recording now, and then we'll come to our Q&A session.